Well, good morning, and thank you all for joining us for the last day of San Francisco Small Business Week and to hear from women in small business. Today's panel will be moderated by the San Francisco City Administrator, Carmen Chu, and will touch on work-life balance, navigating resources, and advancing gender-responsive economic recovery. This exciting conversation is hosted in partnership with the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce's WELL program, the San Francisco Department on the Status of Women, and the San Francisco Office of Small Business. A few quick housekeeping items to mention before we get kicked off here. Today's meeting will be recorded and streamed live on the San Francisco Small Business Week Facebook page. And we will also be posting this webinar on the San Francisco Chamber and San Francisco Small Business Week websites for on-demand viewing if you didn't get a chance to take all your notes here today. We ask that all attendees stay muted during the panel discussion. We will have time for Q&A at the end, so if you have questions that come up during the presentations and the panel discussion, please just drop those into the chat and we'll get to them at the end. And now let's get on to the program. I am thrilled to introduce Kimberly Ellis, appointed by Mayor London Breed to lead the Department on the Status of Women for the City and County of San Francisco in the fall of 2020. Kimberly is working in partnership with city officials, agencies, and community stakeholders to transform San Francisco into a fully gender equitable city. Kimberly is a vibrant leader with tested experience in creating sustainable programs that provide the tools to empower women to make incredible change in their lives and communities. Previously, Kimberly was the executive director of Emerge California, growing what had been a regional training program into a statewide electoral powerhouse for Democratic women and earning her reputation for revolutionizing Democratic politics in the Golden State. Pass it over to you, Kimberly.
Thank you so much, Emily, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our Women's Small Business Policy Roundtable today on this beautiful Friday morning. This Small Business Week event is hosted by the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce and their Women Empowering Leadership and Learning Initiative, also known as WELL, in partnership with the Department on the Status of Women and the Office of Small Business. I'm Kimberly Ellis. I am the director of the Department on the Status of Women. And since 1975, San Francisco's Commission and Department on the Status of Women has led critical initiatives to uplift and meet the needs of women and girls. And in this moment, we are more committed than ever before to our mission. We are in a moment of crisis everywhere we look, with COVID-19, job losses, the climate and political landscape. But this is also a moment where we have witnessed the incredible strength of our communities and the people in them, and especially the resiliency of women. As community leaders, mothers, entrepreneurs, and small business owners, women have stepped up to support their families, their communities, and our city through the global pandemic and an economic crisis of unprecedented magnitude. Now we owe it to women to make sure they're not only considered, but prioritized in the recovery. We know that the stay-at-home orders were necessary to stop the spread of COVID and to keep more people safe. Yet women and small businesses were particularly affected. Women more likely to face layoffs, and as the primary caregivers for children and other family members, more women left the workforce as schools and childcare centers closed. And meanwhile, women-owned small businesses have been disproportionately affected by COVID-19. Women-dominated industries like personal services, retail, and hospitality were hit harder by closures. According to surveys, women-owned businesses are less likely to anticipate a strong recovery, with a worse outlook for hiring, investment, and revenue than men in small business. And in fact, just this morning, employment numbers suggest that women's employment fell in the month of April. And even before the pandemic, women in small businesses tended to have smaller reserves and networks, fewer opportunities for mentorship and support, and a harder time accessing capital and investment. Women-owned businesses were also less likely to get access to recovery loans and programs through the federal Paycheck Protection Program. Entrepreneurship and business ownership are important tools to support women and gender equity. They can give women opportunities to increase their economic mobility, the flexibility to manage their own schedule, and the chance to change workplace culture for themselves. This is not just an issue of gender equity, but also of racial equity. Prior to the pandemic, the net majority of new women-owned businesses in the United States were started by Black and Latina women. For the health of our city and our hardest hit communities, we must support women entrepreneurs and business owners in order to survive the health and economic crises, especially women of color. Women business owners need support, safety, and stability as we enter this recovery phase of the pandemic. Women entrepreneurs are also in need of affordable childcare, particularly single mothers. Mothers who own businesses cannot pay for childcare, and without childcare, mothers cannot reopen their businesses. And so the conversation today is just the start of what needs to be done to support women in small business in the city of San Francisco. The Department on the Status of Women looks forward to continuing collaboration with the San Francisco Chamber, Office of Small Business, and working with city leaders to ensure a gender-responsive recovery that supports women and minority-owned businesses to reduce the inequitable burdens of COVID-19 that we've already seen placed on women of color. I appreciate the incredible entrepreneurs and advocates who are here today to share their stories, their questions, and their ideas. We encourage you to stay engaged to help uplift the issues that are important to women in small business and a gender-responsive recovery. Thank you to everyone for joining us today. And now it is my incredible pleasure to introduce to you all Carmen Chu, who I've known for many years in a personal capacity to be a fierce woman warrior for communities of color and for women. Carmen was sworn in as city administrator in February of 2021. And prior to becoming city administrator, she was the elected assessor from 2014 through 2021. She also served on the Board of Supervisors from 2007 to 2013 and served on the San Francisco Employees Retirement System Board, where she oversaw the investments and policies of a $26 billion public pension system. Carmen is the first Asian American woman to serve as city administrator, and she was also the recipient of a 2020 Good Government Award, an honor that recognizes excellence in public sector management and stewardship. Carmen's values are rooted in her experience growing up as a daughter of immigrants. She is a strong woman of color who believes in providing equitable opportunities for the community. In 2018, she launched the W Challenge, and I'm proud to say that the Department on the Status of Women has been a partner since the onset. The W Challenge is a nonpartisan civic engagement effort aimed at uplifting the representation and voices of women. And throughout COVID-19, she has served as a co-chair of the city's Economic Recovery Task Force. Please help me in giving a great virtual round of applause and welcome to Carmen. Carmen, thank you so much for leading this important discussion, and I will turn the virtual mic over to you.
Thank you so much, Kimberly. Well, first off, I want to tell you just how honored I am that you've asked me alongside with the Chamber to serve as the moderator today in today's conversation. But before I get into the meat of it, I did want to just give a shout out to Kimberly. She's been this person who we have all known, at least in the political sphere in San Francisco, for quite some time, someone who is always there to support women through Emerge, who have really supported women to try to run for office and to really aspire to be at the table when making policy decisions. And so when the mayor made her announcement to ask Kimberly to come on board for San Francisco as the head of our Department on the Status of Women, I couldn't have been more thrilled to see a fearless leader, someone who is going to take these issues and really elevate them, whether we're talking about economic security, security, representation, and equity. Just someone who I am really looking forward to seeing great things come from. So I look forward to working with you, Kimberly, as we go forward, and I'm super excited to partner with you. And today, for all of the folks who have joined us for Small Business Week, I think you're going to really enjoy today's program. There are just a number of speakers who you're going to hear from who have amazing personal stories, but also professional stories to tell you about, not only about how to support women, but also support women in the sphere of business development and business and entrepreneurship. For myself, for people who may not know very much about me, I grew up in an immigrant family. My parents came from China many years ago. And when they first came to the United States, they worked in sewing factories, in restaurants. They eventually saved up enough to open a small restaurant where I was raised. Since the age of 2, I remember being around the restaurant, running around all the way through my high school and college days, early college days, to help out every single weekend. And I know how hard it is for small businesses to generally survive, and in particular during this time of the pandemic. This has been a very difficult past year, not only because of the public health crisis that has impacted all of us, but also because of the economic impact this has meant. And for myself, as even a new mother, I have a almost 2-year-old, I have now understand and appreciate in ways that I have never before the difficulty of trying to balance career and work with family as well, and a young one. And so I think today's conversation with the people on the panel is really an opportune time for us to position our thinking, to think how we might be able to advance the place of women as we think about economic recovery for the city going forward. So again, I want to thank the Chamber, thank the Department on Status of Women, and Kimberly and Elizabeth and team for putting this great panel together. So I'm going to go and jump right into introduction of the panelists today. So we've got some amazing speakers who you're going to hear from directly. We have Lucero de Leon, who is the director at the Renaissance Women Business Center. We have Heidi Pickman, the Vice President of Programs and Policies at CAMEO, which stands for California Association for Microenterprise Opportunity. Emiliana Puyana, who works as a program manager at La Cocina. I have a special soft spot in my heart for Emiliana because she's taught me how to cook. So I definitely want to recognize Emiliana for her good work at La Cocina. Swati Sharma, who is a research and policy consultant at California Healthy Nail Salon Collaborative, and Gina Fromer, CEO at Children's Council. So we're going to hear a little bit more about their background as they start to answer the first question, but just to throw a starter question for everyone on the panel to answer. I think as many people know, entrepreneurship is often a way in which we have an opportunity to elevate our economic security, our mobility, and this is especially true for women of color. And so I know that, I think as Kimberly mentioned before the pandemic, we saw that the increase in entrepreneurship and businesses opening and entrepreneurship was really beginning to rise in our Black and Latino communities. That has changed and it has been really impacted by the recent pandemic, but I'm curious to hear not only a little bit of background from each of the panelists here today, but what do you think your organizations can do to help support some of our women entrepreneurs as we go forward? And perhaps we'll kick it off to start off maybe with Gina first, and then we can go from there. Gina, I think you're on mute.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for that introduction, Carmen. You're such an amazing leader in San Francisco, and we appreciate you so much. Good morning, everyone. I'm Gina Fromer, Children's Council of San Francisco. We have been, particularly over this past year, honed in on women in small business, particularly childcare providers in San Francisco. They have uplifted and held our city down during this treacherous time we've been in over the past year. And even prior to that, Children's Council offers a full range of one-on-one supports, services, and hundreds of workshops across the city. We help 20,000 families annually find childcare, connect them to financial assistance to help pay for it. We support over 1,000 licensed childcare providers in our city, as well as hundreds of family, friends, and neighbor. And that's what we're talking about, those small businesses we lift up. We call them licensed exempt providers. Today, I'm here to focus on our innovative childcare business incubator program, where we're growing small business, which is helping local entrepreneurs, primarily women of color, launch and sustain their own home-based childcare businesses. We're really building a pipeline of new childcare providers in the city, which we know is so desperately needed. So I'm here to represent San Francisco, our childcare ecosystem, and women. I'm a mother and a grandmother. And believe me, I know firsthand about work-life balance and trying to find childcare for my little ones. So I'm really excited to be here today.
All right, fantastic. Ladies, you want to jump in? I can call on you also. Emiliana.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here, and I know that I'm going to walk away from this conversation today wiser and inspired. So thank you so much. Yeah, like Carmen said, I'm the program manager at La Cocina. You know, La Cocina is a kitchen incubator. We've been around now for like 16 plus years in San Francisco. And we work with primarily women from communities of color and immigrant communities and support them in the process of formalizing food businesses. We do this by providing access to an affordable commercial kitchen space and then also industry-specific technical assistance. And I would say that pre-pandemic, we sort of felt like we had really figured things out. We had, you know, a cookie cutter structure that more or less with like 3 or 4 slight variations worked for most of the entrepreneurs coming to our program to start a business. And now, of course, as I imagine many people are, we are scrambling to figure out what those new sort of structures are going to be. I think, you know, during COVID, we have really focused on resiliency. And now that we are sort of entering the next phase, it's all about regeneration for us. So the beginning is, how do we make sure that our entrepreneurs are in a position to survive these difficult times? And I'm happy to say that we've done that. You know, some of La Cocina entrepreneurs have closed locations, but nobody has closed their business down fully as a result of the pandemic. And so we now feel like everybody is, if ever just slightly, strong enough to begin to think about growth and you know, shifting the dynamic now. You know, I think we had always been working to sort of level the playing field. And I think whether we like it or not, the playing field has been sort of destroyed for all of us. And so now we want to reimagine it and really still wrapping our heads around what that could be and how we do that in a way that has women, that centers women, and particularly women of color. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Emiliana. I know that the La Cocina has done a great job of moving to respond with some of the boxes, the food boxes, and other kind of flexible kind of thinking during the pandemic. So congratulations on that. Swati?
Hello, thank you so much for having me here. My name is Swati Sharma, and as Carmen mentioned, I'm a research and policy consultant with the California Healthy Nail Salon Collaborative. I actually formerly worked for San Francisco's Department of Environment, where I managed the Green Business Program, so very familiar with Small Business Week. So thank you again for having me here. With the California Healthy Nail Salon Collaborative, we're a statewide grassroots organization, and we address health, environmental, reproductive justice, and other social issues that are faced by the low-income female Vietnamese immigrant and refugee workforce. We use a multi-tiered approach that blends community organizing, grassroots policy advocacy, and community-based research. And the collaborative really builds power of the nail salon community to develop solutions that really benefit the nail salon workforce and their families. Since we work with a workforce where language access is a major barrier, I would say pre-pandemic, a lot of our work was helping these salons really start their business and navigate the nuances of what it means to start their business, especially when things are not provided in language. During the pandemic, we sort of shifted and we were providing direct services on how do you navigate the unemployment process? How do they keep their business afloat, especially when some of the closures were happening for many of the nail salons? So we've kind of gone from protecting their health to providing them direct services and really helping them run their business. And it's thanks to the many multilingual staff that we have. But it's been, a great community. It's a very tight-knit community. And a lot of what we do, I would say our staff wears many hats. So many of the nail salon community will come with various sets of issues and problems. And our staff really tries to address many of them as best as we can. So thank you again for having me here.
Thank you, Swati. Lucero?
Thank you, Carmen, and thank you to the San Francisco Small Business Week Committee for inviting me to be a part of this conversation. So as Carmen mentioned, I am the new director for the Women's Business Center at Renaissance. And Renaissance Women's Business Center provides business training, business consulting, markets, networks, access to capital, and support strategies that are essential to the successful growth of emerging and established women entrepreneurs. And we're proud to be supporting a lot of the small businesses through the pandemic. We've increased our programming to help women move their businesses online and in the wake of the shutdown, access emergency funding, and adapt to the changing market conditions. And in 2020 alone, 81% of our clients were women, 70% were people of color, and 32% were immigrants. So we've built women-focused curriculum such as networking, peer support events, so that women feel less isolated, are getting support, and feel that they're connected to an entrepreneurial community. We also have provided other training such as like women's empowerment, time management, communicating on Zoom, which was very important towards the beginning, lots of resiliency workshops, and so much more. We're also part of the California Association of Women's Business Center, which is a network of 16 statewide WBCs. And so we're meeting monthly to learn ways of how we can help women, especially as things are constantly changing. And lastly, I would say that we're working to offer our services in multiple languages beyond English and Spanish, which is what we have at this time. So we want to reach different immigrant communities. And so in order to do that, that's something that we're hoping to expand this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucero. Just for folks to know, we've been including links to some of the organizations also in the chat. So just in case you hear some of the things that the speakers have said and you just really want to connect with the organization, just know that the chat function has some of the links to their organizations and you can learn more there as well. Heidi?
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for everybody for inviting Cameo onto this important conversation about women's entrepreneurship, because it is us. When we logged on, I said, wow, what an incredible view we had of all these wonderful faces and powerful women, and just really taking control of their lives and helping their communities as well. Cameo is the statewide network of entrepreneurial trading programs and micro lenders, the ecosystem of small business help. If any of you are on this call who are small business owners, there is a wealth of resources across the state, but especially in the San Francisco Bay Area. We have about 40 organizations that are members of Cameo who, like La Cocina, like Renaissance Center, that provide this business assistance or provide really affordable capital for women business owners. And I think I see a couple of other of my colleagues on. I saw Laura Hoover from Working Solution and some others of you who are on the call as guests. And this, it's this network and this ecosystem, and I can talk more about it a little bit later if we have time, that is really important to support the business owners, and Cameo supports the ecosystem. So while they're supported by such great organizations like Renaissance and La Cocina, we support them. So with policy, capacity building, networking, convening, like meetings like this and other ways. So yeah, looking forward to this conversation. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Heidi, for the introduction. So I think as everybody just probably recognize most of the folks spoke about their organizations and forgot to tell about their own stories. But I hope that at some point we'll have an opportunity to hear more about your own stories and where you got to where you are today. With that, I want to start our conversation on a few topics. One of the pieces that isn't lost on me is this issue around childcare. And so this is a question for Gina and for Lucero. You know, I think before the pandemic, childcare was already a big challenge. At least affordable, quality childcare was already a challenge in terms of the availability of it in San Francisco and the Bay Area. I think with the pandemic, we've seen that there have been even more challenges with running organizations. And not only that, we also recognize that in many instances, running and creating a childcare facility is also a way or an avenue to entrepreneurship as well. So I'm just wondering, from your perspective, Gina, and from Lucero, what is your thought about how we can encourage an ecosystem of affordable quality childcare in the Bay Area when so many things are stacked against us? The cost of doing business here, all of those different pieces.
Yeah, you know, that's a question for the decade. I know right now in our country, the momentum around childcare is just off the charts. And so finally, we're getting some acknowledgement, the recognition that we need, that women are at the core of this entire ecosystem. And that in order for us to meet the needs of families, we have to increase and enhance our childcare availability. And we can't do that in San Francisco particularly because, you know, the cost of pre-pandemic, the cost of real estate is expensive. So you can't just pop a center in the middle of the Mission and think that it's gonna pay for itself. The only way to solve this issue is to enhance our family daycare homes, right? And, you know, we do that by supporting women, entrepreneurs who wanna open up their own businesses, but there's a lot of challenges with that in San Francisco. The cost to start up a business and maintain a business is expensive in San Francisco. The complex local and state regulations, many business owners just kind of give up without support and a place to go to find out what to do. The unknowns of the demand, you know, will I have a customer base? Will I serve my community? Who's gonna know who I am? And so we know there's a huge need for childcare. 30% of our workforce right now relies on childcare. The pandemic has shown that everyone that we are saying had a childcare issue for decades. And without childcare, San Francisco doesn't work. So, you know, we look at the big picture, and if we are able to bring and open up more businesses, childcare businesses, then that will help support and solve our families' problems, all connected. This ecosystem, families need, how much childcare is available, and the cost. And so, you know, that's why Children's Council, we help support with subsidies, but a lot of families don't, they make a little bit too much, you know, and so they don't get anything. And so we work to try to figure all those things out. But the bottom line is that we need to open up more small businesses in order to meet the demand and support families where they're at today.
Thank you, Gina. I definitely agree with everything you're saying. Yeah, we understand that, you know, women have to perform multiple roles in their families, in their communities, and that not all women who are aspiring to start a business have, you know, domestic assistance or that support. So it makes it really hard for them to, you know, start their businesses, and it just becomes really challenging. So I definitely agree that having more affordable childcare can help women dedicate more time, you know, for their businesses, and also give them a peace of mind that their children are being well cared for. And, you know, just what I've seen with our clients, like we've seen a lot of pre-pandemic, we saw a lot of women having a hard time coming to our classes because they didn't have childcare. And then, you know, at the beginning of the pandemic, we did see a lot of women coming in because they were able to be there with their families. But now, you know, we're starting to kind of see that as being an issue again. And we see a lot of families bringing in their children to their restaurant, you know, to the back of the rooms of their cafe, hanging out there, doing work, doing classes while they're running their businesses. So it's, you know, definitely important, you know, to have more affordable childcare.
The only thing I would add is that, you know, for our childcare costs in San Francisco, it's a third of your income. So if you're trying to supply your basic needs to your children and go to school and you have to pay $1,800 a month for childcare and you're making less than that, you know, you have to get support, of course, but what are the options? You know, we're literally taking choice away from women, and that is not okay. And so by increasing the availability, supporting small businesses open, this can, it really does, this is a women's issue. It's a housing issue. It's a basic needs issue. Childcare is critical for families to function on the day-to-day.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely true. It's both about supporting families who do work, but it's also an avenue for entrepreneurship, for people to be able to have destiny over their kind of work and how they structure their lives. And I think that's important too, because we've seen, you know, when we take a look at the disparities in terms of women's earnings, and we take a look at the disparity in terms of women's savings and wealth, there's a significant gap, and in particular for women of color. And so I think it's really important that we continue to foster the opportunities that might be open. Which leads me to a question that I do have for Swati and for Emiliana. You work often with many women entrepreneurs in your day-to-day life, whether in the restaurant industry, catering industry, nails, and the healthcare industry. But you know, we've also seen in the last year that women have had a particularly tough go in the pandemic. They've been disproportionately impacted, especially, you know, in terms of some of the directed hate that we've seen in the AAPI, the Asian Pacific American Islander hate crimes that we've seen, where women business owners have been in particularly targeted. And I just wonder what your perspective is, having continuing to work with so many women entrepreneurs. Do people feel that they are particularly vulnerable? What does it look like to be able to support women business owners as they come out of this pandemic?
Sure. Thank you for bringing this question up. So as we know, we keep hearing about the increased AAPI hate that is occurring even in San Francisco over the weekend. We had a few incidences that occurred. And then as for nail salon workforce, they're scared. In Southern California, there were many nail salons that received hate mail. And then here in the Bay Area, we had a woman that was exiting a beauty school and was attacked and dragged by a car. So we're seeing this increasingly. I think initially it was COVID that folks were scared of, and then now it's the increased anti-Asian hate. And so what our organization is doing is we're trying to provide support for this issue. We've assembled and distributed several community safety kits for this workforce, which includes personal alarms, whistles, and other materials. We've created and translated materials on safety in the workplace, including what to do when there's an active shooter situation. We've provided self-defense trainings in Vietnamese, and we've done live trainings, and we're also creating a video to distribute that folks can watch. We're currently developing an in-depth training for the nail salon workforce to address what can they do when situations like this arise, and how can they try to maybe de-escalate some of these situations. We've done a few live trainings on Facebook Live in terms of self-defense and community safety. And then what we're also doing is we're partnering with other orgs that specialize in self-defense and community self-defense. And we're hoping to do some live trainings with this workforce to better equip them. But also we hope to just bring to light conversations. It's one thing that we equip this workforce on self-defense, but how do we stop this hate in the first place? And how do we as a greater community talk about these conversations and really get to the root of why this is happening? So we are there as a support, and it's a major issue, and many we've heard it from many nail salon workers that they are scared to return as they see so much of this hate that keeps coming up.
Yeah, and I remember just you know, when my parents had a restaurant, they were, you know, you often feel like you're very alone when you're in the restaurant because there's no one else around, right? And I remember when my parents had the restaurant, it was kind of separated away from other businesses. So you really are kind of on your own. And there were a few instances when I know my mom was held up at gunpoint with, you know, a gun pointed right at her temple. And, you know, what do you do at that point? And, you know, I think it's a very scary thing. And it's one thing, I mean, it's never a good thing to have that happen, but I think it's another when there's kind of no reason for it to have it be because you look a certain way, right? And I think that it's an incredibly scary time for the Asian community, among others. And, you know, to the extent that there's anything that we all can be helpful with, I hope that you'll reach out to us, Swati, to help you amplify some of the training and the messages that you might have. Emiliana?
Yeah, thank you. That's a incredibly important question. And Swati, it makes me think that La Cocina should reach out to you and learn more about some of the things you're doing, because they're really needed and wonderful. You know, I think at La Cocina, the members of our community who are Asian are clearly very concerned. We have been lucky thus far that none of them have really experienced this firsthand, but you know, the conversation is there, and how do we as a community show up for them, make space, you know, for the heaviness of the moment, and then also think together as around, you know, how do we support their businesses, protect their businesses, and also highlight them in this time, you know, to really try to, as best as we can within our medium of sort of food, shine a spotlight, you know, in a really rich and diverse culture that is like sewn into the fabric of the San Francisco Bay Area. So that's, yeah.
Yeah. You know, and I think as we kind of think about, you know, all the ways in which we need to come together to support women entrepreneurs, whether through childcare or through some training to help folks be able to feel safer in their work environments, especially during this time. One of the most fundamental pieces is whether women entrepreneurs have access to capital, right? And I think this is a huge, huge question. I know we've had these conversations, Emiliana, before about La Cocina and some of the things that we could be doing as organizations to help support women as they're beginning to come up. And I wonder from your perspective, Heidi, I know that overall, when the PPP money came out from the federal government, it was really meant to try to help create a stopgap in terms of the bleeding for folks to be able to apply for these loans. But that being said, there was a lot of questions about whether people could survive long enough and recover enough to even pay back those loans. And so I'm just curious from your perspective, if you thought that the program, you know, did people generally have access to the funding that or capital that you thought they should have? What would success look like if we were to actually have a system that actually provided enough capital to our women entrepreneurs?
Sure. Well, historically, the record hasn't been great, right? Women entrepreneurs have received $1 for every $20 that men get, whether that's because, you know, that people like to explain it away because women are in less capital intensive industries. Well, you know, that may account for a little of it, but it's not going to account for that 1 to 20, that's 4%. No, 5, yeah, 4%. So the PPP, I don't really want to talk about the PPP because I think it was a disappointment for many of the people on this call and many of our community. Some people might have gotten it, great. It is a forgivable loan. I think people are more likely to have gotten the EIDL advance from the federal government or accessing some of the other programs. I do know for the first round of the California Relief Grant, that women got 53% of the grants, women-owned businesses. You had to be, to count as a woman-owned business, it had to be owned by have ownership of 51% or more by a woman. I also want to say that for the California Relief Grant, 65% of those dollars have gone to women, minorities, and minority women business enterprises. I think there is the acronym. So there's other types of traditional, that other than the traditional programs that women can access. And I want to point to our Cdfi network, especially for women business owners, because many of them are mission driven to serve women business owners. If you don't know, if you're a women business owner and you don't know of your CDFI, which is Community Development Financial Institution, and Laura from Working Solutions just posted into chat something about a different a resource, but she's from one of those. There's others that are operating. I'm not going to get them all, but I know that there's TMC Community Capital, there's Opportunity Fund, there's a whole host of lenders, Main Street Launch, that they're mission driven, and if they're going to look at a woman's application as the same, they're going to look at a man's application. They don't have any beef, and in fact, you might even have a leg up if you're a woman, if you're a women's business owner, because they're mission driven to serve those who aren't getting served by the traditional banking institute. I would like to add one thing, that capital is one piece of the pie, but there's, we like to say there's 5 C's in the ecosystem that are important, and when all those are in place, and I think that's what a lot of what La Cocina and Renaissance do, and the other organizations, they provide coaching, C1. They may not provide capital, but they provide the credit training needed to get to the capital. They provide connections to other business owners, connections to markets, connections to clients, and the connections to each other for the support. I think as women, one of you don't have to go it alone. We're natural collaborators. We collaborate. We're natural, not every woman, right? But generally speaking, we're connectors. We enjoy the support and can thrive on support of others. So nobody should feel like they should have to do it alone. There also needs to be good policy in place, and there also needs to be a good culture for entrepreneurship, and those are kind of outside the purview. But I think just by having San Francisco Business Week illustrates the good culture of entrepreneurship and business ownership in the Bay Area in San Francisco.
I add something to that. Thank you, Heidi. That's great, because you hit on exactly what we're seeing for startup childcare businesses, that they need help with navigating the licensing process and transforming their home into the high quality childcare site. They need to understand how to lower startup costs through grants, like you just said, and they can get books and toys through lending libraries. We have a lending library, so they don't have to buy everything. Connecting the government dollars. Children's Council helps connect them to different, from LIFT to all other sorts of entities that exactly do what you talked about, and also access to an online helpline. So there is help out there, and we want to make sure that you know interested in starting a childcare business or any business, reach out to your local CDFI or Children's Council, because we can guide you in the right direction, especially if you want to open up a childcare business. But that is so critical, helping them understand how to navigate just the business arena that's so complicated, right?
Exactly, and that's what Emiliana does for food businesses, and that's what Lucero does at Renaissance for almost, well, I don't know what, I know you guys deal with almost everybody from dog walkers to dentists. I mean, a dentist knows how to fix teeth, not necessarily how to run their business. Same thing with the dog walker, and that's what these programs teach. There's also a network of women's business centers, as Lucero mentioned, that's statewide. There's 16 of them now in California, I think the most out of any state. So it's really, really exciting. And they've really proved their point this year, they've risen. I can't tell you of the good work. I can't rave enough about the good work that everybody's done. And everybody's really stepped up to the plate in this pandemic. And I'm sure, I mean, I don't know you, Gina, but I'm sure you and Swati, I think you have also, it sounds like the work that you're doing, and you should all be part of the Cameo Network, but the work that you're doing is, you're stepping up and serving the business owners, and small business is finally getting its due, at least in the policy circles, and understanding that there is some real resources. The state has never given $2.5 billion with a B, $billion to small businesses as grants. That has never happened before, as far as I'm concerned. And they did that during the pandemic, so we know that it's possible. We know it's important, and many of them sure went to visit some of your clients, Gina, and some of your clients, Swati. So hopefully Lucero and Emiliana, you can tell me that a couple of your clients have also gotten it. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for us at La Cocina, I mean, and I think as every business has been really affected, but food businesses has been so directly affected by this pandemic. And, many of the relief efforts in the way of grants and government sponsored loan programs have really, I think, fallen short in understanding the true intricacies of the food business in particular. How many of our restaurants in cities across the entire country are owned by immigrant-owned, immigrant-run businesses? How many of those folks are undocumented? One thing that this pandemic that we knew already was the case, but this pandemic has highlighted greatly is the issue around computer literacy. Yeah. What happens when our world suddenly becomes virtual and so many of these entrepreneurs have a real difficulty with that. And then suddenly their business hangs in the balance by their ability to log on at 9 a.m. as if they were buying concert tickets, right, and input all of this complex financial information. And where is the real support in getting these things done? The Restaurant Act just launched 9 a.m. on Monday morning. So this is like a real example, right? And it was a great fund with a lot of potential for food specific entrepreneurs to gain access to much needed funds to make up for all the losses of the pandemic, right? And I think this is one of the better funds that has come out there, really prioritizing women-owned business, socially disadvantaged businesses, making an application that is not too cumbersome, though it was a little, right? But what people don't know that happens behind the scene is hours and hours and hours of walking people through this application. Oftentimes you don't even know what the application is going to look like. Luckily, this time around, we had a sample application and doing, running numbers through a calculator to see how much you might qualify for, and then going back and looking through your books on QuickBooks or calling your accountant and pulling reports on your sales platforms. Like these are like real complex things. And I'm not saying that they need to go away altogether, but where is the real support so that we ensure that, yes, you have all these amazing funds that people can access, but really ensuring that then everybody has a fair shot at gaining access to that, and I think that's a huge point for me. And we're seeing it now when some of the folks at La Cocina that received the PPP loan, now that we're going through the forgiveness process, and what a lift that has been for us as an organization and for the partners we work with in really trying to collect all this documentation. And so what's the sweet spot there between like ensuring that the people who really need it are getting it, and then also ensuring that they actually can get it?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, Emiliana, because we struggled with this even with government services, right? Especially when the shelter-in-place order was first put in, the immediate thing was, okay, we've got to go online, make telephone, all of that. But the truth is that not everybody has access to computers, to good internet, or have the literacy to be able to know how to utilize the internet, or to how to get on or log on or use a computer. And I think those are some of the things that we're definitely taking away from the pandemic, is really just understanding what we need to be doing in terms of the digital divide, because that's not something that's going away. Technology is not going away. How people are connecting on the internet is not going away. And so how do we start to address some of those challenges that exist for our children, right? For educational and distance learning, for our seniors, but also for our business community. So it's a huge challenge. And that's something that I think we need to come together on more thoroughly. We've got go ahead.
I just wanted to add something really quickly. So yeah, as Emiliana was saying, like, we were able to help small businesses access over $18 million, all of the Renaissance organizations. But, we do recognize that many people were kind of left out, weren't able to receive the assistance because, technology, like they had trouble accessing the resources, they didn't have the right financial documentation that was, required, or their businesses were just not formalized or set up for that. So yeah, we're definitely working, to that, to help women and all small businesses to be prepared so that, if there is another crisis, hopefully we don't have one, or they're ready just to grow their businesses, like accessing capital won't be a barrier for them. So
yeah. So we've got just a little bit of time before we end our session here today, but I want to do just a quick fire round for everyone to answer. We've talked a lot about dreaming big and trying to think about a society and a system that is different from what it is today. And I think what many of us mean by that is a society and kind of an economic space where it's an equitable economy, especially for our women. So I just wonder, what does that look like in your mind? And is there a quick thing that you think that we should be focusing on? Anyone can jump in.
Yeah, I have two big dreams for the future. Collaborative ownership. I just think we need to stop pretending that we can do things alone, and really create a structure that allows for people to come together and run the sorts of businesses that allow them to then live the sorts of lives that we want to live, and then sort of in that vein, I think one of the things that we've really seen through this pandemic is mutual aid and how valuable it is. And so really a culture of sharing both the resources that we have and then also the burden of the difficulties of being in business in this world.
At Children's Council, our vision is that every child in San Francisco has the opportunity to reach their full potential. And so that vision, it really depends on moms, particularly those in communities of color, having the same options as their male counterparts. Whether they want to go to work, go to school, be at home, it would be their choice, right? Our end goal, Carmen, is that a high quality early care and education system from children 0 to 5, a universal system. That's our goal. And, no wait list for subsidized kids or childcare spots, livable early care and educator wages that are on par with K through 12 counterparts. A system that ensures that all children, regardless of their family's race, income, has access to high quality, affordable education, and and they go to kindergarten ready. That's what we envision. And we're gonna, we know that women in their own businesses, they have the opportunity for generational wealth, because if you're an immigrant mom coming to San Francisco and you open up your own and you're serving your community, your daughter can go in there and learn and go to school and become a teacher. There's generational wealth that happens. It's sustainable. You can make $100,000 a year starting your own childcare business, right? Whereas if you're in a center, your wages are low. So we need to really fight for wages so we can bring more people into the field. And so that's what we envision, is this universal strategy for childcare that's going to really uplift everything you're talking about. Emilia, Alana, you can't get women coming to you or anywhere if they don't have anybody watching their children in a quality setting where they feel safe. Their kids can be safe. So Carmen, you know that because you got a 2-year-old and I have 4 boys. I adopted 3 more kids. I know firsthand how hard it is to find childcare in San Francisco, but I did it and now I'm a CEO. So I know it's possible.
I'd like to say something. I know my title is, I couldn't retype my name, but I'm Christy Harbinski. I own my own construction management consultancy. I'm Filipina. And I would like to see, I used to work as a consultant for Mayor's Office of Housing because I built a lot of affordable housing. And they had this very loose program for people like me to work for MOHCD. And I was only supposed to work there for a year. But then, unfortunately, what was not explained to me was there was a massive conflict. And I was too green to know at the time. So I did the right, I've been in government and as a public servant for a long time now, 8 years. And I should have gone to Dennis Herrera and said, hey, because they offered me an opportunity and said, hey, Christy, you can work on these affordable housing projects just as long as, you can work for us, part-time. And then I was a temp employee, hybrid consultant. And I was like, okay, this sounds great. I'll grow my business. But then Kathy Looper, who is my mentor, she goes, you better ask Dennis Herrera about that. And I did. And he goes, you absolutely cannot do that. So it screwed my business up. And I wish somebody, maybe I should start it and to, because there's a lot of women in technical professions like me, and we just don't have the time to pay attention to this stuff. And maybe this should, these loose programs to help women. And I know it was all well-intentioned, but I would like to, help women navigate that system more.
Thank you, Christy. Do you mind, maybe you can share your contact with us in the chat as well? And then I would love to hear more about some of the ideas that folks are hearing about from the audience, and also want to give some of the panelists the final opportunity to say their last pieces before we move to Q&A.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Christy.
I think some of the visions that our organization and I have already been brought up, but just to kind of summarize it or re-summarize it again, I think for women in small businesses, not only funding, but language access, that has been a major barrier for the small businesses that we work with, where there may be applications online, but they're not in language access and they're not in language. And so it's been a huge barrier. I would say addressing the biases that exist against women business owners, and just kind of a platform to help women navigate that. We've talked about the solution for childcare, which would be wonderful. And then this has already been brought up, but more mentorship and networks, especially for women of color in communities, and especially networks that might be in language. I think there are wonderful networks and wonderful mentorships that exist out there, but sometimes they're not necessarily in language, and they might not be addressing the same concerns that women of color have.
Yeah.
So just kind of addressing and connecting those gaps.
Wonderful.
Yeah, go ahead, Lucero.
Oh, thank you. I would add that, big dreams would be, to remove all barriers so that women can achieve their dreams. And many women, from what I've seen, lack a lot of understanding of their personal finances and business finances. So having more customized, financial empowerment trainings, allowing them to just easily access grants to start their businesses, or just, access affordable capital, building healthy relationships with money, understanding, pricing and charging like what their time, services, and products are really worth. I know a lot of women are always, not always, but a lot of women struggle with putting the right prices. So just allowing them to really see their true value and worth in their businesses. And lastly, just, women supporting more women, or just everyone supporting more women-owned businesses. So specifically going out to, look for a woman-owned restaurant, hiring a female CPA or bookkeeper for your business.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Wow, I don't have much to add to all of that. This sounds great. This sounds like a great vision for the future. I guess the one thing on the access to capital side that I like to add is that, because this is not true, is that when a woman, a Black woman or a Latina woman or an Asian woman or man walk into a bank, that they receive the same treatment as I would, or my husband, or some other white person who walks into the bank. There's been some studies that there's this very, that it's those there's simple things that happen at the very beginning of the capital access process, like being offered alternative products, like being welcomed with a smile. Can I help you? Well, if you can't, you're not good for this, but you might be good for this product. And it's not equal treatment or across the board. So I'd like to live in a world where that's not an issue, like where that doesn't exist, where you walk in and you got your numbers and you got your proof in place. Great, we're going to give you a loan. So anyway, that would be the only thing extra I could add to, I think, the wonderful vision that everybody else has expressed.
Well, I wanted to say thank you to all of the panelists. I'm going to turn it over to Kimberly to do a little bit of Q&A, but that being said, I'm just so inspired by all of your good work and look forward to working with you into the future. We've got a lot of work to do.
Indeed, yes. What an inspiring and educational conversation. I want to thank you, Carmen, for your time and energy that you have given to today's conversation. I want to thank Gina and Heidi and Swati and Lucero and Emiliana also for your time and energy today. I know that Carmen and Heidi have to go, but Heidi, before you go, you shared something which I thought was brilliant, and that was the 5 C's. And I couldn't write as quickly as you were speaking. So if you could repeat those 5 C's, I think they were just really powerful and very succinctly articulating important pillars to sort of have in place. So I got coaching, capital or credit training, and connections. And then what were the last 2?
Sure, it's connections to each other as well as to markets, clients, right? Everybody needs clients when they're business. And the other one is culture, entrepreneurship being a viable career path. And I think there's no shortage of that in San Francisco and California. And climate, having the right policies. Climate is the policy stuff. Let's not make extra burdens for small businesses. Let's make it, if you're going to apply for a $10,000 loan, let's not give you the same underwriting criteria that you're going to need as you're going to get $100,000 or $200,000 loan. Let's make regulations in the city as well, accessible to small businesses. And I'll post a white paper, a link to a white paper we did in chat. That we can dive more into that.
Yeah, thank you for that. And again, thank you to our other panelists. For those of you who are able to stick around of our panelists, please do so. And I want to use these last few minutes to open it up to Q&A from the audience. I want to just say that, to your point, Heidi, about policy. As someone who has worked in the space of empowering and supporting women, specifically to get elected, I know that so much of this is really rooted in policy. And so to the question of sort of what can San Francisco do to help support women in small business, and especially those communities that have historically been underrepresented, marginalized, and in fact, invested in. I think that we should really focus on our policies and ensure that they are such that they are supporting small businesses and women in small business. And so this has been, again, a very inspirational and also educational conversation. And I think we have a lot to work with in terms of putting together a blueprint, if you will, for San Francisco to really enact some policies that are going to help to support us being an engine that is really turning out small business owners for the future and really creating a model, which I believe is what San Francisco was born to do, and that is to lead. And so I'm looking forward to this being the first of many conversations of how we can go about doing just that. So at this time, I want to invite the audience, if you have any questions, to drop them in the chat. I think we have Elizabeth Newman, who is our Policy and Programs Director for the Department on the Status of Women, with us today. Elizabeth, not sure if you're going to be kicking over any questions to me, but wanted to invite you into the conversation as well. Looking in the chat here.
Thank you, Kimberly. We did have a question come in from Deborah, and I know Christy had a question off the bat. So if folks want to take themselves off mute and just ask their question directly to the panelists, we could do that if they haven't been typed into the chat function.
You want me to repeat my question, or?
Yes, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. My name's Deborah, and I'm with Monroe Personnel Service in Temp Time. And I really enjoyed your conversation today. Thank you. And, but you know, I've been in business 35 years, and soon into my business, I was certified as a woman-owned, minority-owned business. And I don't know, I think it kind of changed. Now it's called a local disadvantaged business. But the instructions have always been, and I don't know if it's changed now, because I think it got really cumbersome for me as a small business person to spend time going through the city's website looking for something that might fit us. And we provide staffing, and most of the contracts were like construction. So I actually did a lot of that, and I would show up at the pre-bid meetings and all of that. And once in a while, someone would contact us because we're on the listing. And like we did have something with the city administrator's office when Daryl Burton was there, and that was great. And with the controller's office. But that's all dried up. And I'm wondering, like, are there ways to make that process easier if it isn't already easy? Because I am not frequenting that website anymore. Does this all make sense? So as we come out of this quarantine time, you know, there's a lot of things that are shuffled, I would think, and maybe there will be new opportunities for us that you're hoping to create or to see created. So I think process might be a stumbling block.
Yeah, do we, Lucero, do you have some sage words of advice to share with Deborah and others who might be experiencing what sounds like difficulty, understandably, navigating what can oftentimes be a cumbersome, you know, bureaucratic process with government?
Yeah, so I would say, while I'm still getting familiar with those programs, we can definitely connect you with one of our consultants to kind of walk you through the process if you are having any questions. Also, I know that many SBDCs help with getting those certificates, so I would also reach maybe the San Francisco Small Business Development Center.
And one thing I'd mention, but you know, I can see that there'd be pitfalls for this, but there was a time when I connected with one of the contract administrators. I don't know what the people are called in your, but one of your employees. And he would contact me once in a while and say, you know, there's something that might fit your business. Have you thought to look at that one? Like, so, you know, I don't know, it might be effective if you had like a relationship with someone. I think the people at the SBDC are very helpful, but they're not in the know. Or anyway.
I could add a little bit to that, just working for San Francisco government and then being on the other side. We just went through the process of going through the small business contracting and certification process with San Francisco. And it was a little bit difficult to navigate, but I would also say the Office of Contract Administration, which is OCA, anytime we had any questions, we emailed them and they were really responsive, like right away. So it was great to just get that responsiveness back. The website definitely was, even for us that have gone through several certifications, it was difficult for us to go through. So I can't imagine folks that haven't gone through it. It could be more simplified. I fully agree. Even there's different certifications for women and minority-owned businesses for the state, for California state, and that process is also very cumbersome and difficult to navigate. But that being said, whenever I contacted the Office of Contract Administration, they were very responsive.
Yeah, thank you for that.
The only thing I want to add is that from getting a license to building new room in your house, it's tough to navigate, but be dogged and just go after it. And there's help out there. So, you know, look, just keep going. And I think it's set up, men have set these systems up, and you know, let's not give up. You know, we got to get through them. And I think educating policymakers on how complicated these systems are for women, especially immigrant women and women of color, to navigate. And you want us to do more businesses, but you make all these levels. Come on, let's create a better process. And so I support changing policies that will make it easier for women to navigate these systems. And it's not that we don't know how to do it. It's just like we got a lot of other things that we manage multiple balls in a household. So making something a little bit easy for us to navigate will be advantageous for women.
And less time consuming. It was just sort of like,
Absolutely.
if you were a large, ultra large construction company, you could have two people just focusing on developing new business with the city. But when you're trying to, you know, you've got to put like you've got to put your time where there's the most results, and that's
Yeah.
thank you
Well,
very much.
Yeah,
Let's
and
move
thank
on
you,
to the next
Deborah,
one.
for your question, and Gina for that as well. And I think what I heard very clearly was, we need to make this process easier and easier to navigate. And quite frankly, more small businesses owned and run by women in San Francisco is only going to benefit San Francisco. And so it behooves them to ensure that the system is such that women can get in, navigate, go through the process and open up their businesses. So I want to thank you for your questions. Now, I want to just sort of wrap up this part of it. And again, thank our incredible panelists for this conversation. Want to thank the San Francisco Chamber and their events team, the Office of Small Business, and all of you, the attendees, for taking time to join us. Again, this conversation is just one step of many, and we are committed to keeping the needs of women centered in every discussion, as it should be, especially as it relates to the economic recovery. And now, to close out the event, it is my pleasure to introduce someone who is fighting every day to ensure that women, mothers, small business owners, and the residents of her district are not left behind. Mirna Melgar has decades of experience working both in the community and within the city as an urban planner, economic development expert, and dedicated public servant. She is a champion for the needs of our city's people, especially those who have been historically disadvantaged. Mirna's family immigrated to San Francisco from El Salvador when she was a child during the 1980s, fleeing that country's civil war. As for so many others before and since, San Francisco provided Mirna's family with refuge and economic opportunity. Mirna Melgar was elected District 7 Supervisor in November 2020. And as supervisor, she represents the West Side's diverse communities from over 40 distinct neighborhoods. Please join me in one of my personal sheroes, Supervisor Mirna Melgar.
Thank you so much to the Department of the Status of Women, the San Francisco Office of Small Business, the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce for hosting this much needed space to engage in policy as it intersects with women in small business. It's a Celebrate Small Business Week. I am Supervisor Miranda Melgar from District 7, and I am honored to be with you all and to be closing today's discussion alongside City Administrator Carmen Chu and Director Kimberly Ellis. Although I am not able to be with you all today, I want to state that now more than ever, we need to work together to uplift women in our city, and especially our women in small business. There are so many barriers already to small businesses, and for women, and especially for women of color, starting a business or being self-employed should be easier. In concept, that's simple enough message, but we know that being a small business owner is hard work. But women get the job done. From running small businesses to now recovering from this pandemic, women are holding it down for communities all across the nation and in San Francisco. My grandmother, Fidelina de Jesus Aguila Trejo, was a small businesswoman. In El Salvador, with a second-grade education, her small business allowed her a level of freedom that was rare for women at the time. It allowed her to become a homeowner and put all her kids, including my mother, through university. It allowed all of us, her descendants, myself included, a better chance in this world. Small businesses allow amazing, entrepreneurial, creative women to succeed and thrive when the doors to employment are sometimes closed in our faces because of still existing gender bias and discrimination. And even when we succeed, as many of us do, access to capital and business technical assistance and networking is not equitably available to women. Last month, I introduced legislation for the city to focus on a gender equitable recovery plan, and the needs of small businesses are no different. As you have all been discussing all day, women of color in the year of COVID have had to juggle their jobs and livelihoods with providing for their families and navigating caregiving in their homes. We need to support women, and as the budget is coming up, we need to put our money where our mouths are. Money and getting women direct funds in the small business space is essential to our economic stability and recovery, and to moving on to nurturing our businesses, our community, and our city. In District 7, we have women operating and running their businesses along Taraval, Ocean Avenue, West Portal, and not just in my district, all through the city. We have women who are taking pride in their businesses, their work, and control of their future. But of course, there is much support that still needs to be given after the grueling year that was 2020. I asked the Business and Legislative Analyst Office this question. If women-owned businesses have been able to apply and successfully get loans and grants available in San Francisco at the same rate as non-women-owned businesses, I think we have a sense of that answer. But from this report, I will be working on legislation to streamline funding sources to women and for women. They say it takes money to make money, and I'm committed to working with all of you to make sure women are at the center of every conversation. Thank you again for having me, and have a great Small Business Week.
Thank you to Supervisor Melgar for those closing remarks. We want to thank again City Administrator Carmen Chu, San Francisco Chamber, our panelists, Gina, Heidi, Swati, Lucero, Emiliana. Thank all of you, our audience, for joining us today. We hope you have a great weekend. Stay safe, and don't forget to get vaccinated if it's your turn. I want to turn it over to Emily to close it down.
Thank you, Kimberly, and thank you to all of our panelists. What empowering and informative conversation. Thank you all for your time. And as Kimberly mentioned, thank you to all our panelists, all of our sponsors, the San Francisco Department on the Status of Women, and the San Francisco Office of Small Business. Today's event coincides with the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce's WELL program. WELL stands for Women, Empowering, Leadership, and Learning. And we host a number of events throughout the year, including the ever popular WELL conference each fall. To learn more about the WELL programming, please visit sfchamber.com. And now to celebrate Small Business Week, I hope you all can join me tonight. We're having a Small Business Week mixer. So that's tonight at 5:30. I hope you all can join. Small business should be highlighted this week, but also all year long. We will be continuing to have our Small Business Week programming for the next few weeks to continue shining the light on this incredible community. In particular, we have a very special webinar hosted by Bill.com on May 11th at 10 a.m. That will be with our president and CEO, Rodney Fong, who will be speaking to several chambers throughout the country to offer insights and advice on how to best support local small business communities. So thank you all so much for your time. Thanks for joining us. Thank you again to our panelists, and have a wonderful weekend.